Welcome to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast. We're diving deep today into Sahih Muslim, Book 20.
Sounds good.
And this one is all about government.
Very relevant.
It is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to unpack some of these ideas about leadership, obedience, and just the nature of Islamic governance as we understand it.
Absolutely.
I'm joined by our expert in Islamic texts to help us navigate this.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So one of the first things that jumped out at me was in a series of hadiths from 4473 to 4482.
Right.
And these all seem to emphasize that leadership should remain within the Quraysh tribe, even if there's only 2 people left on earth.
Yeah, that's a very bold statement.
It is. What's the significance of the Quraysh and why this emphasis on them as leaders?
That's a great question, and it takes us back to the very beginnings of Islam.
Okay.
The Quraysh tribe was prominent in Mecca, even before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received his first revelation. They were very powerful socially and politically, and they were very influential.
Yeah.
When Prophet Muhammad started preaching Islam, a lot of the early converts came from the Quraysh tribe.
Oh, interesting.
Including key figures like Abu Bakr and Umar.
So their connection to the Prophet makes them important. But these hadiths, they seem to suggest that leadership should stay within this specific lineage.
Right.
What do we understand by that? Is this about bloodlines?
So it's easy to interpret these hadiths literally and see them as promoting a hereditary form of leadership. But throughout Islamic history, scholars have offered many different perspectives. Some scholars say that the emphasis on the Quraysh isn't necessarily about a strict lineage, but rather understanding the qualities associated with them during the early Islamic period.
Right, so less about who they are and more about what they represent in terms of like the qualities needed for effective leadership.
Think about it. They were known for their strong leadership, their eloquence, their understanding of Arab customs and traditions, and even their trading skills, which were really important for Mecca's economy. These qualities were seen as really beneficial for leading a new Muslim community.
That makes a lot of sense. And it kind of leads perfectly into another hadith that caught my eye, Hadith 4475. It states that people follow the Quraysh in good and evil. And that really drives home the point about the responsibility that comes with leadership.
Absolutely. It's a double-edged sword. It's not simply about power or authority. It's about recognizing the profound impact that a leader has on their community, for better or for worse. It's a call for leaders to be mindful of their actions and their influence, because people will emulate them, whether their actions are good or bad.
And it's also, I think, addressing the responsibility of the followers, too. It's saying that people should be discerning. They should be aware of the leader's actions, good or bad, and respond accordingly.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not just about blind obedience.
You've hit on a crucial point. This hadith, it doesn't merely burden the leader. It reminds the followers that they have a role to play. They have a responsibility to critically evaluate their leader's actions. And while obedience is encouraged in Islam, it's not absolute. I believe this hadith encourages us to be active and engaged members of our community, not just passive followers.
That makes sense. So this raises so many questions about the nature of leadership and the limits of obedience. But let's move on to a topic that directly relates to the Quraysh and leadership. So if leadership was meant to stay within this tribe, how did they decide who specifically should take the reins? After the Prophet Muhammad passed away. This brings us to the question of the caliphate.
Yes. The question of succession was a crucial one. It wasn't always clear-cut, and the early Muslim community navigated this issue in really fascinating ways. So there wasn't a rigid system like in a monarchy. Let's look at Hadith 4486. It gives us a glimpse into this process by recounting Ibn Umar's conversation with Hafsa, the Prophet's wife, and Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph.
So this hadith takes us to a critical moment. Because now we're at the second caliph. Umar's nearing the end of his life, and there's all this speculation about who would succeed him.
And especially with this emphasis on leadership being tied to the Quraysh.
Exactly.
So what's fascinating here is that Umar chose not to appoint a successor.
Yeah.
Hafsa was concerned about this,
Right.
but Umar believed that forcing a successor on the people
would create division and instability.
Yeah, it could cause a lot of problems.
So that was a risky move, wasn't it?
Well, Umar believed it was the best way to preserve the unity of the Ummah,
Right.
the Muslim community.
Okay.
And he drew a parallel to the Prophet Muhammad himself,
Okay.
who did not explicitly name a successor.
Interesting.
Yeah. The Prophet, peace be upon him,
Right.
trusted the Muslim community to determine its own leadership.
Okay.
Through consultation and consensus.
So he was kind of upholding the prophetic model of leadership.
Precisely.
Which emphasized collective decision-making
Mm-hmm.
and prioritizing the well-being of the community.
Yeah.
Above all else.
It really set an important precedent for Islamic governance.
Okay.
It emphasizes that leadership isn't about inheriting a title, but it's about demonstrating the qualities that make you fit to lead.
Right.
And ultimately, it's the community that has a role to play in recognizing and choosing those leaders.
I see. That's fascinating. Because it's a contrast to the idea of like a divinely ordained monarchy or even like a purely hereditary system.
Exactly.
It's suggesting that leadership is earned, not simply inherited.
Right.
But that leads us to another question.
Okay.
If someone aspires to a position of leadership, how should they approach it? Is ambition a negative trait in Islam?
That's an excellent point, and it's a very relevant question even today. Islam recognizes that leadership requires a certain level of ambition and drive.
Right.
But the motivation behind that ambition is crucial.
I see.
So let's delve into Hadiths 4487 and 4489.
Okay.
They address this very issue,
Right.
the dangers of seeking authority for personal gain,
Right.
and the importance of sincerity.
So Hadith 4487 tells the story of the Prophet advising Aded al-Rahman ibn Samara to not actively seek positions of authority.
Right.
He says that if he's given the position without asking, God will help him. But if he actively pursues it, he will be left to his own devices.
It's a potent message about humility.
Right.
And recognizing that true authority comes from God.
Yeah.
It challenges us to reflect on our intentions. Why do we seek positions of authority? Is it for personal gain, power, or prestige?
Right.
Or is it out of a sincere desire to serve others and uphold justice?
Okay.
When leadership becomes about fulfilling our egos, it loses its spiritual grounding and we become susceptible to corruption and abuse of power.
And this is further reinforced by Hadith 4489, where the Prophet encounters two men who are seeking to be appointed as rulers, and he responds by saying that he doesn't appoint those who explicitly ask or are driven by personal desire.
Right.
So again, he's emphasizing that leadership should stem from a place of service, not self-promotion.
These hadiths highlight the importance of sincerity in leadership.
Right.
They remind us that true leadership isn't about titles or status. It's about embodying the qualities of justice, compassion, and humility. A leader who seeks to serve God and their community will be guided and supported, even if they never actively pursued a position of authority.
This is so relevant in the modern world.
It is.
Where the pursuit of power often seems driven by ego and ambition.
Yeah.
These hadiths offer a refreshing perspective on leadership, urging us to prioritize service and sincerity above all else.
It's a message that resonates across time and cultures. It reminds us that true leadership is a trust, a responsibility that we must approach with humility and a sincere desire to serve a purpose greater than ourselves.
Yeah. These early hadiths in Book 20 have already given us so much to consider about the nature of leadership within Islam.
For sure.
They emphasize the importance of character, the weight of responsibility, the need for community involvement, and the dangers of seeking authority for personal gain. It's really a powerful foundation for understanding how Islam envisions governance and the qualities that make a leader truly righteous and effective.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's so much more to explore.
For sure.
So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into Sahih Muslim's Book 20.
Sounds good. We've been unpacking the concept of leadership and the qualities that define a just and righteous leader.
Yeah.
But there's another side to this coin that we need to examine, the concept of obedience.
Okay, so how does Islam approach the idea of obeying those in authority?
That's a crucial question, and it's one that has been discussed and debated by scholars throughout Islamic history.
Okay.
Islam places a great emphasis on the importance of obedience, particularly towards those in legitimate positions of authority, but this obedience isn't absolute.
So it's not just about following orders without question?
Not at all.
Okay.
Islam recognizes the importance of individual conscience and moral reasoning. Blind obedience can lead to injustice and the perpetuation of wrongdoing.
Okay.
The Quran and the Hadith offer guidance on how to navigate this complex terrain.
So let's look at some specific examples. Hadiths 4518 through 4520, narrated by Abu Huraira, lay out the general principle of obeying those in authority.
Right.
They emphasize that obeying a rightful leader is akin to obeying the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and ultimately obeying God.
These hadiths establish a framework for understanding authority within the Muslim community. They highlight the importance of maintaining order and unity. However, it's crucial to remember that this framework is not meant to stifle critical thinking or individual moral responsibility.
So there's a balance to be struck.
Yes.
How do we know what the line is? When is it okay or even necessary to disobey?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Hadiths 4533 through 4536 address this very point. The exceptions to the rule of obedience, they emphasize that if a ruler commands something that directly contradicts Islamic teachings or principles, then disobedience becomes not only permissible, but obligatory.
So it's like saying, obey your leaders unless they're asking you to do something that goes against your fundamental understanding of what's right and wrong according to Islam.
Precisely. Islam recognizes that our ultimate allegiance is to God and his laws. No earthly authority can supersede that. If a ruler commands something sinful, something that violates the principles of Islam, a Muslim is obligated to disobey.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is.
It really underscores the importance of individual conscience.
Absolutely.
And the idea that we are all accountable for our actions, regardless of who is giving the orders.
It places a significant responsibility on the individual to be knowledgeable about their faith, to develop their moral compass, and to have the courage to stand up for what they believe is right, even if it means going against those in power.
I'm thinking about that incredible story,
It's
4535 and 4536, about a commander who orders his men to enter a fire.
It's a dramatic and powerful example. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, makes it very clear that there is no obedience in matters of sin or disobedience to God, even in the face of a direct order. If that order violates the core principles of Islam, a Muslim must refuse.
And in the Hadith, the Prophet praises those who would refuse to enter the fire. Even if it meant disobeying their commander.
He does.
So it's a chilling reminder that blind obedience can have severe consequences. It also highlights the courage and the conviction it takes to stand up for what's right, even when facing authority.
This story challenges us to think critically and to develop our moral courage. We cannot simply abdicate responsibility for our actions by saying, I was just following orders. We are all responsible for our choices.
It's a principle that resonates throughout history, isn't it?
It does.
We see examples of individuals who had the courage to stand up to unjust authority. Even when it was dangerous to do so.
Exactly. This principle of conditional obedience is a cornerstone of Islamic ethics. It underscores the idea that we are not passive subjects. We are moral agents entrusted with the responsibility of discerning right from wrong and acting accordingly.
This concept of conditional obedience has huge implications for how we engage with authority in our own lives.
That's right. Think about situations where laws or policies contradict our ethical beliefs. Or when we witness injustice being perpetrated by those in positions of power. These hadiths remind us that we have a duty to speak out, to challenge injustice, and to refuse to participate in anything that violates our conscience.
It's about finding that delicate balance between respecting legitimate authority and upholding the higher principles of justice and righteousness. It's about being an active, engaged, and morally responsible member of our community.
Exactly. And it requires continuous learning, self-reflection, and the courage to act on our convictions even when it's difficult.
Yeah.
These hadiths don't offer easy answers, but they provide us with a framework for navigating these complex moral dilemmas.
So we've established that obedience is not absolute in Islam.
It's not.
It's bound by principles and limits.
Correct.
But this raises another question.
Okay.
If those in authority have a responsibility to act justly and according to the Islamic principles, what happens when they don't?
Right.
What are the consequences for leaders who abuse their power or betray the trust placed in them? This leads us to the next crucial theme in our deep dive.
Okay.
The conduct of rulers.
That's a fascinating and critical area to explore.
Yeah.
Islam offers clear guidance on the responsibilities of leadership and the consequences of failing to uphold those responsibilities. It emphasizes that leadership is a trust.
Right.
And those who betray that trust will be held accountable. So we've talked about the qualities of a just leader and the limits of obedience in Islam.
Yeah, and now I want to flip the script and focus on the conduct of those in power, the rulers. What does Islam have to say about how leaders should govern and the consequences they face if they stray from the path of righteousness?
It's an essential aspect of Islamic political thought.
Okay.
The Quran and the Hadith offer so much guidance on how leaders should conduct themselves.
Okay.
The emphasis is always on justice, compassion, accountability, and a deep sense of responsibility towards those they govern.
So it's not just about having power, it's about how that power is wielded.
Precisely. One of the most striking analogies we find is in Hadith 4496, narrated by Ibn Umar. In this Hadith, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, compares a ruler to a shepherd. He says, "Beware, every one of you is a shepherd, and everyone is answerable with regard to his flock."
Okay.
So he then goes on to explain that the caliph, the leader of the Muslim community, is a shepherd over the people and will be questioned about their well-being.
That's such a powerful image.
It is.
Because the shepherd's responsible for guiding and protecting and providing for their flock.
Yeah, it's not simply about leading them.
Right.
It's about ensuring their welfare and safety.
Exactly. And this hadith really underscores that immense responsibility that comes with leadership. It highlights the idea that leadership is a trust.
It is.
Those who are entrusted with authority are accountable for how they treat those they govern.
They will be answerable to God for their actions.
So it's not just about like worldly power. There's like a higher level of accountability.
Absolutely. And this concept of accountability is further emphasized in Hadith 4500. It's a warning from Makil ibn Yasir to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who was a very powerful governor at the time. This hadith basically says, like, God would forbid paradise to any ruler who dies while being treacherous or unjust to their people.
So it's like a chilling reminder that leadership isn't a license to exploit or oppress. There are severe consequences for those who betray the trust placed in them.
This hadith underscores the link between leadership and morality in Islam. Power must be exercised justly and with compassion. Betrayal of that trust is not only a failure in leadership, but it's a grave sin in the eyes of God.
There's a strong emphasis on justice being at the heart of Islamic governance.
Without a doubt, justice is a fundamental principle in Islam, and it's especially crucial for those in positions of authority. But it's not just about avoiding oppression or tyranny. Islamic teachings go further. They encourage leaders to be proactive in ensuring the well-being of their people.
So it's about creating a society where everyone's rights are protected. And everyone has an opportunity to thrive.
Precisely. And this includes ensuring economic fairness. We see this reflected in Hadith 4505, where Abu Huraira narrates a warning from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about the severity of corruption and the misuse of public funds.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah. So in this hadith, the Prophet paints this vivid picture of the Day of Judgment. And those who misappropriated wealth or engaged in corrupt practices will be burdened by their ill-gotten gains.
I see.
They'll be carrying the weight of their corruption, symbolized by things like growling camels, bleeding ewes, heaps of gold and silver, and the Prophet emphasizes that he won't be able to intercede for them
Right.
because he had already warned them
Yeah.
about the consequences of their actions.
That's a very powerful image.
It is.
It really drives home the point that corruption and the abuse of public trust has severe consequences, both in this life and the next.
Right.
It emphasizes the leader's responsibility to be honest stewards of the resources entrusted to them.
Exactly. It's a reminder that leadership is about service, not self-enrichment.
Right.
A just leader uses their position to uplift their community, to ensure fairness and opportunity for all.
These hadiths we've discussed offer a really compelling blueprint for Islamic governance.
I agree.
They emphasize the importance of just leadership, the limits of obedience, and the shared responsibility of both the rulers and the ruled to uphold a just and righteous society.
It's a vision of governance grounded in the principles of justice,
Right.
compassion, accountability, and service to others.
It's been fascinating to explore these profound concepts with you.
Likewise, I really enjoyed this discussion.
As always.
Yeah.
And until next time,
Yes.
peace and blessings be upon you all.
And upon you be peace.